What you're looking at is not what you think it is. It's not money. Not really, it's a ghost. We're taught that economic collapses are loud, dramatic affairs, bank runs, breadlines, wheelbarrows of cash. But what if the most significant monetary collapse in modern history already happened, and nobody told you? What if the death of the world's reserve currency wasn't a single event, but a slow, silent poison administered over 50 years? Quick cuts of seemingly normal, prosperous scenes, a bustling stock exchange ticker, people shopping in a mall, cargo ships being loaded. But the footage is slightly desaturated and slowed down, creating an uncanny, eerie feeling. This is the story of that death. It's not a story about a specific day the dollar failed. It's the story of the day we all agreed to pretend it hadn't. This is what happens when the foundation of the global economy crumbles, and everyone just keeps dancing on the floor above. The global economy is a cathedral. For 80 years, its cornerstone has been the US dollar. Every trade, every debt, every sovereign wealth fund, every barrel of oil, it's all priced, measured, and settled in this one currency. We call this exorbitant privilege. But what if that cornerstone was never stone at all? What if it was sand? The mystery I want you to consider today is this. When did the dollar actually die? Or was it in 2008, when the Federal Reserve began creating trillions of dollars out of thin air to save the banking system? Or was it during the COVID-19 pandemic, when that trickle of money printing became a tidal wave? The shocking truth is that the dollar didn't die in a single moment. It was killed by 1,000 cuts. And the most dangerous part? Not to 1971, but to the end of a world war. Their goal was simple: prevent the economic chaos that led to the Great Depression and ultimately the war. The US dollar would be the world's reserve currency, anchored to gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. It was a system built on trust, but trust backed by a tangible, physical reality: Fort Knox. The system only worked as long as the US didn't abuse its privilege. And then the 1960s happened. The Vietnam War, the Great Society, massive government spending. To pay for it all, the US didn't raise taxes enough. It started printing more dollars. Lots of them. The number of dollars in the world began to vastly exceed the gold backing them in Fort Knox. They started doing the logical thing. They began showing up at the US Treasury's door, asking for their dollars to be converted into gold. France, under Charles de Gaulle, even sent a warship to New York to collect its gold, a deliberate and stunning act of financial warfare. The US was bleeding gold. The cornerstone of the global economy was being chipped away, shipment by shipment. The system was breaking. And then, on one weekend, one man made a decision that would change the world forever. This is the moment. The first and most important cut. August 15th, 1971, President Richard Nixon goes on television and announces a new economic policy. In a move that would later be called the Nixon shock, he suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. I've directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Read that again. Suspended temporarily. It was a temporary measure, he said, to beat inflation and protect the dollar. That temporary measure is now over 50 years old. In that single act, Nixon transformed the nature of money itself. The dollar, by extension all global money, was now worth something because the government said it was asterisk. Its value was no longer derived from a physical object of limited supply, but from trust in the US government and its management of the economy. The dollar was no longer a measure of wealth. It had become a claim on future wealth, a promise. And this was the silent death. At first, the consequences were chaotic. The 1970s saw stagflation, high inflation, and high unemployment. The dollar was volatile, but then something remarkable happened. The world, having no better alternative, simply agreed to keep using the unbacked dollar. A deal was struck with Saudi Arabia. The US would provide military protection. And in return, OPEC would price oil exclusively in US dollars. This created a perpetual global demand for dollars. Every country needed dollars to buy energy. It could now run massive trade deficits, fund endless wars, and fuel domestic consumption, all by printing the currency the world was forced to use. An animated chart showing the U.S. national debt from 1971 onwards begins a slow, then increasingly steep, climb upwards. And print it did. The debt began to climb. And for decades, the consequences were masked. The dot-com boom created the illusion of infinite growth. The phantom felt real, it felt solid, but the foundation of sand was shifting. It would only take one good push to reveal the abyss underneath. The banking system, built on a mountain of bad debt, was about to collapse. And the authorities faced a choice. Let the free market correct itself, which would have been incredibly painful, or double down on the phantom. A printing press appears, and a massive, staggering number rolls up, $1 trillion created out of nothing. The Federal Reserve, under Ben Bernanke, began quantitative easing QE. In a few years, the Fed's balance sheet exploded from under $1 trillion to over $4 trillion. It just added more sand and hoped nobody would notice, and it worked. They stopped the immediate collapse. The stock market recovered, but they fundamentally broke the pricing mechanism of the entire global economy. Images of ultra-luxury real estate in New York and London, supercars juxtaposed with images of rising homelessness and help-wanted signs. This new money didn't flow evenly. It flooded into financial asset stocks, bonds, real estate, creating massive bubbles and enriching the asset-owning class. It didn't cause consumer price inflation immediately. It caused asset price inflation. The 2008 response was a confession. It proved that the system could no longer tolerate a real correction. COVID-19 pandemic. The playbook from 2008 was used again, but this time on steroids. The response was unprecedented in human history. Visual. The Federal Reserve animation returns. The printing press goes into overdrive. The numbers become almost comical. $4 trillion in a matter of months. Trillions of dollars were created and handed out, directly to citizens and businesses. It was necessary to prevent a total economic meltdown, they said, and perhaps it was, but the consequence was inevitable. You cannot pour that much gasoline on a fire without expecting an explosion. B-roll. 2021 to 2023. Footage of now hiring signs, supply chain chaos, container ships waiting at port, and finally, the grocery store shelves with soaring price tags, and then it arrived, the inflation, not just in assets, but in everything. Food, energy, rent, cars. The Fed is now desperately raising interest rates, trying to put the genie back in the bottle. But they are trapped. Trapped. On one side, a monster called inflation. On the other, a cliff called recession, deflation. The Fed is stuck in the middle. If they raise rates too high to kill inflation, they will crash the economy and make the already staggering national debt, now over $34 trillion, impossible to service. If they stop too soon, or print again, they will hypercharge inflation, destroying the savings and purchasing power of every American. The fixes have failed. The phantom is demanding its due. Out. And while all this was happening, the rest of the world was no longer just watching. Meetings of BRICS nations, flags of China, Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, and the new members like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Ethiopia. For 50 years, there was no alternative to the dollar. A world map. Lines are drawn, bypassing the U.S., showing direct currency swaps between China and Russia, China and Saudi Arabia, India and UAE. China and Russia have been conducting bilateral trade in yuan and rubles for years. In 2023, China brokered a historic deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The geopolitical subtext was clear. Saudi Arabia has openly stated it is willing to price oil in other currencies. The BRICS alliance, which now includes oil giants like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE, is explicitly creating a parallel financial system to bypass the dollar. Central bank gold buying hit a 55-year high in 2022 and again in 2023. Nations are fleeing to the very asset Nixon abandoned. U.S. share of global GDP has fallen from 40% in 1960 to about 24% today. The US dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has fallen from over 70% in 2002 under 58%. Today, a steady, deliberate decline. This isn't happening because these countries hate America. It's happening because it's in their rational self-interest. They saw the US weaponize the dollar through sanctions against Russia, freezing $300 billion of its assets. They asked themselves, could we be next? They saw the endless money printing. The world is building a lifeboat, and America is still dancing on the deck of the Titanic, convinced it's unsinkable. So where does this leave us? The dollar isn't going to vanish tomorrow, but its unchallenged supremacy is over. Death was silent, but the aftermath will be anything but. Here are the 3 things you need to understand. 1. The death was a process of debasement. Its value has been eroded by design. Since 1971, the US dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. The dollar in your pocket today is worth less than 15 cents compared to the pre-$1,971. 2. The system is addicted and cannot go cold turkey. To truly stop would be to induce a depression that would make 1929 look like a minor recession. So the most likely path is more of the same. More printing, more debt, more kicking the can, until the system breaks in a much larger, more uncontrollable way. TWO. Geopolitical power is decoupling from financial power. The world is decoupling, or de-risking as they call it. This means more volatility, more uncertainty, in the end of the simple, dollar-dominated world order. We've been living in an era of financial fiction, and the final chapters of that story are now being written. New global reserve currency, a basket of currencies, gold-backed system run by BRICS. This isn't just a story about economics. It's a story about power, trust, and the fragile stories we tell ourselves to keep the world running. The dollar died, and no one was told. But now you know. We dismantled the complex systems of power, money, and history every single week. Because understanding the death of the dollar is the first step to preparing for the world that comes after. The story isn't over.